Hey everyone, welcome to Tactical Manager TV once again. Today we're going to do a match preview for Manchester United versus Leeds United that's going to be played on December 20th, 2020. And we have a very special guest to talk about these teams. He played for both teams. You guys are probably familiar with him. Alan Smith, welcome to the channel. Thank you very much for taking the time to be here with us.
No worries, it's my pleasure.
All right, Alan. So I'm going to go with the first question for you. And this episode's about you, so I'm barely going to talk about this. What's your opinion on the current Leeds team under Marcelo Bielsa? Do you like it? Are you optimistic about it? You are a Leeds fan, so I'd like to hear your opinion on it.
Yeah, very optimistic. Obviously, coming out of the Championship and probably a year too late from what everyone would have liked in terms of what happened to the end of the season previously. As a club, I think that they needed to bridge that gap from the Championship to the Premier League, just to bring back, obviously, the history and the tradition of the club. Getting back into the top flight and getting back into the Premier League was a massive achievement. And I think sometimes when you look at big clubs that have come back from being in the Championship or even in League One, as we were for too long, it's a case of the expectation levels straight away, regardless whether Leeds have been out of the Premier League for 16 years or whether they've been out for 1 year. The expectation from the surrounding area, from the city, from the people who support the club, would always to be go there to compete in the Premier League and not just be an also-ran. And I think that that's what the club demands. And I do not know the manager really well. I know the owner really well. And I think that that's what they demanded from the people inside the club, that they went into the Premier League not scared of any other club. And I think we saw that when they went to Anfield on the first game to play against the champions, that they went toe-to-toe. They tried to match Liverpool, and even, like you say, a few games in when they played Manchester City, they went toe-to-toe with that team as well. And I think that as a club, to bring back your identity and to make people stand up and take note, that was an approach that they obviously wanted to do. And I think that one thing that has happened, and there's been good results, indifferent results, and probably bad results from what they'll speak about internally. But I think what it has done, it's put Leeds United back in the forefront of a lot of people's minds in terms of, even if you didn't know them previously, then know them now because of the coach, because of the style, because of how they play.
So, Alan, you mentioned that it has a lot to do with the club's philosophy, and you talked about how you know the owner and how they're not afraid of Liverpool, Manchester City, doesn't matter who they play. Do you think that has more to do with the club owner or maybe Bielsa too, or both? They have the same philosophy.
I know that from speaking to the owner before Bielsa was in charge, I think he wanted a manager who would be able to bridge that gap between who would bring. I think for a lot of coaches, like the intimidation factor of playing in the Premier League from being in the Championship, a lot of teams would go and sit back and not be as brave as, obviously, Bielsa is a coach who's coached some of the best players in the world and coached on the biggest stage. So I think the match of them two together, the owner knowing what type of person he wanted and what type of club that he wanted to create for himself as an owner, and obviously employing someone of Marcelo's pedigree, I think that he knew once they did get promoted, then the philosophy that he wanted to bring would be created by the manager himself, which is why I believe it's such a great relationship that they've got.
I figured that you bring it to that. It's probably a mix of what the owner wanted. He brought a manager that he knew he would put that in the field. And you see a team that plays high press. They're never defensive. Doesn't matter who they play.
And I think the hardest thing for Leeds as a club, historically, obviously, there were a lot made this weekend of the FA Cup final in the 1970s, etc., etc. I think that the history of the club is so great in terms of in European football. Everyone remembers the great teams of the 70s that we had. To find a team that can then put their own stamp of authority on what they're doing. Obviously not to that level, just because of the standard that they created, getting to European Cup finals, winning European trophies, winning the FA Cups and winning the Premier League, or as it was, is so difficult to emulate. I think in a period of time where football's changed. I think people look for the performance in the players, and the actual style of football comes before winning trophies to some people now, in terms of what they like to see from the team is not necessarily always winning football, but a certain style and a certain type of football.
As a fan, you want to enjoy what you're watching. You don't want to just go there and win titles. You want to enjoy your team. And I guess the philosophy for Leeds is just following what the fans are used to and what they wanted to see now that they're back.
And
Alan,
the hardest thing is to create that brand of football with the success. And that's like you say, that'll hopefully be a long-term goal of the club. But first and foremost, it is creating an identity that people can be proud of. And I said to my brother the other day, like, I enjoy watching the games, and everyone that I speak to who knows, obviously, of my relationship with the club says, "Oh, I love watching Leeds. They're one of the best teams to watch now." So that's always nice to see people that hold your club in high regard, and the way that they play and the style that they're playing as well.
which just adds to how good the Manchester United Leeds game will be in the 20th, for sure. And
Because
Alan,
both
I was
teams
gonna.
have that
Oh, go
philosophy,
ahead.
attacking and attacking and attacking.
And Alan, let's go to another topic here, which this one I'm very curious to your opinion as a Manchester United fan. What are your thoughts on the current Manchester United team, the struggle we've been having ever since Fergie retired? And do you think we're on track with Ole Gunnar Solskjaer, or I don't know if you want to go into that topic, but do you think we need someone with more experience? What are your thoughts on the current Manchester United right now?
Where they're sitting in the league, and how the hardest thing for Manchester United is you're only one game away from a crisis, or you're only one result away from a crisis, and everyone speaks about it. At half time in probably most of the games this season, it's a crisis at Manchester United, and then they come back against Southampton. It's like people look and see, because they're still arguably the biggest club in the world in terms of when people look at their results. And like I said, every result is a crisis. Midweek against Paris Saint-Germain, it's a crisis. Half-time against West Ham, it's a crisis. And they go on to obviously come back against Southampton, and they come back against West Ham, and they've put themselves in a great position now to challenge, which internally I'm sure all of his staff and his players are thinking, we've got an opportunity to try and go and win the league. That's obviously what they will be aiming for. Whether they can do that this year or they can go close this year, I think for them to challenge this year will be a good progress. And I think that they will challenge. And I think they'll challenge based on there's a resilience there of the players that you see coming back in games when they're dead and buried. And they've got that spirit of the teams that Ole Gunnar played for always went and played right till death. And I think that they've got a nucleus of that squad now that seems to be able to produce results when they're on the back foot.
I actually, as a fan, I loved what you just said. I really love that. I think what you said is spot on. I do blame myself at times too for being overly critical of the team, because I grew up watching the team you played for, and part of the Ferg year. I became a Manchester United fan in 1999.
Yeah.
So when they won the Champions League, even Solskjaer scored. And it was just a decade where Manchester United was always winning titles every season. And I think the fans still have that. So they put that team up there. They put an unnecessary pressure on the team. It is a young team too. There's a lot of young players in it. And I think it's what you just said. Every game, we create a huge crisis. We lose to PSG. It's like, oh my God, Ole out. This is done. It's not working. And then we go and we beat Leipzig 5-0.
I think a lot of that is, though, I think that's a lot of external. I don't think that's internal in terms of obviously being at the club, and obviously a lot of behind the scenes doesn't change in that football club. So although it's a crisis on the outside to everybody else, internally, they'll all be quietly confident that they've got enough quality, they've got enough good players. And I think sometimes, like you say, it's so difficult, and clubs have found it. Liverpool found it for so long. Other clubs have found it that, like, it's tough to win championships. Like, it's never a given that somebody won a title, and because they did so well for so long, you might have a period in time where that doesn't happen. I know Barcelona had it for a long period of time before Guardiola, etc., etc. And now, like you say, both Madrid and Barcelona are in a little bit of a transition period. So it's a case of, I think it happens all over the world, and I think that the big reason that you hear about Manchester United so much is because when football took off all over the world in the 90s, the early 2000s, they were the team. So even if you knew nothing about football, they'd probably know about Manchester United. Previous to that, it was all about Liverpool. So it's like, historically, it always comes back around. And I think that, although you said there's a lot of critical, blah, 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 I think internally, and the real supporters of the clubs, they understand that clubs have peaks and troughs. And I think the best clubs, like you say, the clubs that have the real sort of understanding of what goes on, don't panic at them difficult times, and over time, the longevity, hopefully, stands them in good stead.
I agree with everything you said, and I even criticize myself for being overly critical of Manchester United. And it has to do with what you said. We just believe they have to always win, and that's not how it is. AC Milan has been going through a rough decade, and they were, you know how big they were.
Yeah, and I think it's not just Manchester United. If you look at Liverpool previously in 80s, they were the biggest club in the world in terms of they were winning everything. They looked undefeatable. And then, like you say, throughout the late 90s, early 2000s, they won cup competitions but struggled in the league. So it's a case of, like, it goes round. Historically, football has a history of repeating itself. Leeds were exactly the same. When I was growing up as a kid in the early 80s, we were in Division 2. We were never... And then we got promoted in the early 90s. And then as a 90s, 2000s team, for 10 years, we were one of the teams at the top echelons of the Premier League. And then you get relegated, you have a few years out of it, and then hopefully you can come back. Aston Villa, historically, let's say, European Cup winners, not so long ago. Nottingham Forest won 2 years
Nottingham Forest
back. So it's not just the teams that people see now. I think that was just a period of time where football took off all over the world when Manchester United were the team to beat. And I think that sometimes hinders them and helps them, obviously, in the global game.
Just to confess one thing, I'm a Manchester United fan. We're obviously rivals, but when Leeds United was back in the Premier League, I was happy. I was like, this is what we want. Like, it doesn't matter because I know we're rivals and I want Leeds United to lose, but I don't want them to be away from us. We need to play each other. And it was kind of empty not having the Manchester United Leeds derby for so long in the Premier League.
And I think that going from Leeds to Manchester, there's a massive rivalry. Going the other way, when I went there, I realised that all the players were like, oh, we'd love Leeds to get promoted because we loved going there and playing because they're the real games. The atmosphere, like the camaraderie, the fans, the rivalry. Like, players love playing in big games. That's what they thrive upon. So it was strange when I went there that they actually were like, oh, we want Leeds promoted because that's one of the first fixtures we looked at.
Would you have celebrated the goal?
That's one of the fixtures that turns us on. Pardon?
Would you have celebrated a goal if you scored versus Leeds?
I've not thought that far yet.
And Alan, to finalize the preview here, on the 20th, Manchester United and Leeds play each other at Old Trafford. Yeah. What do you think the score will be?
Oh, from looking at it, I think there'll be goals. That's for sure. I think it could be. It'll be entertaining. I'm going to go 3-3.
3-3. Okay. I'm not copying your prediction. I was going to say 2-2. I'm keeping it there. I think it'll be a draw. Goals. Bielsa's going to go right after Ole Gunnar Solskjaer. I think he's a better manager, in my opinion.
It'll be an entertaining game. That's for sure. It'll be very entertaining.
Right now, at the time of the recording.
The strongest part of both teams is obviously offensively. So I think that both teams try and attack. And let's say I think a 3-3 draw.
Yeah, I can see. I think a draw with goals. That's what I think will happen in the game too. So Guys, my prediction 2-2, Alan's prediction 3-3. It'll be pretty impressive if one of us gets it completely right. And it'll be
Some good money.
at the time of the recording, Leeds United's currently sitting in 14th, Manchester United in 5th. I personally think both teams will improve in the table eventually. I think Leeds United will be close to a top 10 team this season, and Manchester United will be a top 4. And I think you agree with that too. And wouldn't you?
I believe so, and I believe that regardless of what we think, I think internally, as football clubs, they will both think that as well. I think that Leeds' aim will be a top 10 finish. Like I said, build on what they've already started. Try and win the ugly games, grind out results in the ugly games. And I think, like you say, for Manchester United, I know that the standards that the top 4's got to be their aim. And below that, obviously, as a club of their stature, has to be an underachievement. So I think you're correct in what you say. And I think that looking at it now, I think the Premier League title race is wide open for any team.
More than it's been in years.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that, like you say, what we touched upon at the start, because there's been no real pre-season, I think teams starting to hit the real form now. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out. And like you say, it'll be good viewing for us. So I'll be looking forward to it 20th. See if you get the prediction right.
We'll see who gets it right. In the channel, they call me the king of predictions because I got a couple right. We'll see if I can keep that throne, or you're going to take the throne from me. One time in the channel, you need to take the throne from me already, the crown.
A 2-all draw or a 3-all draw, I'll be happy with either.
Guys, I want to thank everyone very much for watching. I want to thank Alan Smith for taking the time to be here with us today. Thank you very much, Alan. I'll let you close the episode with any thoughts, anything you want to say.
No. Like I say, it's been a pleasure speaking about, obviously, 2 clubs that I was fortunate enough to play for. One club, I spent most of my youth years there. And then the other club probably taught me so much about football in an environment that probably will never, ever be replicated in terms of playing with some of the greatest players in the world that I was fortunate enough to play with and be part of. And like I said, it's something I can look back on fondly and to have played with some of the greatest players that a lot of people have, especially in the Premier League, have ever seen. So thanks for having me on, and hopefully my prediction's right. We'll see.
We'll see. Thank you, everyone. Alan Smith.